sometimes you have to remind yourself that like you have agency.
Make sure that you look good in a suit and know how to play golf.
The visceral reaction I'm having now is this.
What a waste of time.
It's not something we're taught. And I would even go a step further and say it's not even something we're told.
It's hard being the first. It's always going to be hard.
Cool. You assume that I'm dumber and cheaper than you.
You're kind of figuring it out on your own.
I didn't even know people did that until after I graduated. A lot of lawyers suck at it.
It is.
We suck at it.
In my brain, it kind of makes sense.
That's the only place it needs to make sense. Sweet. I don't know how to actually film that. I just put under roll like butter. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Non-Billable Hours. I'm Odette, and today I have a really cool guest with me. We met through the podcast. Longtime listener, first time guester. We'll fix that in post. She's a lawyer. She's so brilliant. She's lovely to talk to. And 5 minutes into this, you're going to love her just as much as I do. Her name is Maleeha Akhtar. But before I introduce her, I just want to say, if you're watching this, please give us a like or subscribe because the like button is free. It's free of charge. Free 99. Maleeha's nodding her head. And I know you probably hear that all the time, but it really does make a difference in helping this channel find more people. All right, into the good stuff. So my guest is Maleeha. Maleeha is a Canadian technology lawyer and commercial lawyer who lives at the intersection of tech and law. Think SaaS deals, data privacy puzzles, and figuring out what to do with AI before it figures us out, which is wild. She's lived in or explored over 25 countries. She speaks 4 languages and brings a global vibe to almost everything. Basically, she's part lawyer, part world traveler, part translator, and she's always got a cup of Tetley tea nearby. So welcome, Maleeha.
Hi.
Hi. Does it always have to be Tetley?
No, but it tends to be like builders like tea that you get in the UK.
Yes. Okay.
And
yeah.
like Tetley's tastes the closest to me, I think.
Tetley's the best one. Yeah. What's your favorite kind of tea?
Just orange pekoe.
Orange pekoe?
Yeah. I get really confused by flavored teas. Other than because I'm Pakistani, so we drink a lot of green tea.
Nice. My mom's also orange pekoe.
Come along, Bort.
Are you talking to me?
No, my son is also named Bort.
Yeah.
She's from Iran, and anytime I try to feed her any other kind of tea, she's like, do you have any normal tea? She just calls it normal tea.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I get grumpy, and I have friends who'll give it to me, and I'm like, but I'm not going to drink it. So then I end up gifting to other people. So then other people
You're the tea regifter.
I am.
Love it.
I do it all the time.
Well, thank you for being here. I'm really excited that you're here. It's funny because before we started rolling, you were telling me, and you mentioned this when we met for coffee a few months ago, that when you initially reached out, you were so kind and you wanted to actually help with contracts or any of the kind of legal stuff that I might need you for, which was so sweet because we'd never met before. And then I was just like, I'd love if you wanted to be a guest on the podcast.
Well, I was really surprised because I genuinely thought I was meeting, which I was at the time, meeting a creator who was, just starting a podcast and really looking at a space that nobody's really addressing. And so then when we really hit it off, I thought, okay, well, she's asked me to do this. I guess I can do it. It's great to be here.
Your use as a human is helpful. Everyone's got a story, and I just love talking to people.
No,
so
that's great.
I'm really glad you're here. So I kind of like to start at the beginning because everyone's journey into law is a little bit different.
Right.
And I know that you've just recently started a new job.
I have.
But could you take me back to where you went to law school and how the journey to law school was for you? Did you go right from undergrad into law school?
No, because I basically, so I grew up in the UK and then we moved to Canada and I thought, okay, well, both my parents are doctors. My brother and my brother-in-law are doctors. And I thought, okay, well, that's what I was going to end up doing.
Well, my father was a mechanic. His father was a mechanic. My mother's father was a mechanic.
I ended up kind of following my interest, which was kind of the commercial business space. Went to business school in Ottawa, and then was going to do what every business student did, which was you work at a consulting firm for 2 years and then you go and get your Ivy League MBA and stuff. Right. And what happened was that one of my clients was this Indigenous reserve just outside of London, Ontario.
Cool.
And so they were going through kind of some of their legal processes with the government. And because I had no kind of context in terms of kind of these issues, because I didn't grow up here. I needed to read the Indian Act and like, you know, kind of research as much as I possibly could. And so that was the first time where I thought, you know what, maybe I should write the LSAT.
Casually.
Well, you know, not like Carolyn, who was just like basically kind of writing it on the whim.
She's just like, I'm just going to write the LSAT and flew to Thunder Bay like the next week or something.
That
like
was crazy. And
yeah.
But I felt quite seriously about it too. There's a train station or like a subway station by Yonge and Dundas.
Yeah.
And that used to open up at 6 a.m. And so I would wake up, get on that, like I'd be there when they would open it, take that, get to Kitchener, work, come back, then study for the LSAT, and then kind of and I did that for like 8 months of like kind of like being a monk, really. And it was interesting because during the middle of that, there was Ramadan. And so everybody was fasting, and they were like kind of complaining about their schedule being weird because you're waking up early. And I was like, it makes no difference to me. And so
like Ramadan is every day.
Whatever.
Right now. I'm up at sunrise.
Yeah. So
yes.
God. So then I applied to a bunch of schools, got into UAuto eventually. And then I remember very specifically the first class I went, I could feel like I'd kind of found my people. And that was really quite comforting. So yeah.
And when you say you found your people, what did you see in them that you hadn't seen? Like, what did you see in your classmates where you were like, oh, I belong here. Like, this is great.
I think it was just the sense that, you know, everybody was smart. They wanted to contribute in some way.
Yeah.
And
was quite a like civil justice heavy that.
So it was interesting because like half the class kind of wanted to go into politics, and the half of the class wanted to like really kind of change the world. Right. And I was in the class thinking, I just want to do corporate tech work. So, you know, so sometimes when I'm spending time with my lawyer friends, they joke, it's just like, you know, you're just going to get the bill, aren't you? And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I can do that.
Well, they're like, sugar mommy it up, like, no problem.
Like my legal kind of career has been really about following my interests. Like, you know, I didn't have to go through OCIs because I had like this internship at the Canadian Internet Public Policy Clinic, CIPEC in Ottawa. And that was amazing. We got to like research like the Edward Snowden documents and all that.
No way.
It was so fascinating.
So wait, so what do they do? What's their kind of role? Because I'm so ignorant about like business and tech.
Right.
I don't know.
So it's basically like kind of a legal clinic based out of the University of Ottawa, and like they intervene at the Supreme Court, which we did I think like 7 interventions during my articling term.
Holy!
And that was crazy.
That's more than most people get in their careers.
Yeah, which is exactly why I decided to article there, because I kind of knew that I was going to end up either in-house or at a firm, but you just don't turn that down. And then after the clinic, then it was, you know, technology companies I worked at. And now just, you know, I just signed on for a new role at VW and Audi. And so, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So.
And so you told me that you love cars.
I do.
And so you're like really like happy to be where you are now.
Yeah.
So did you have a kind of like career goal in mind? Like what specifically kind of lawyer you wanted to be, exactly what you wanted to work on? Or were you kind of just open to anything in that kind of realm?
One of the benefits of having literally nobody around you be a lawyer is that you're kind of figuring it out on your own. The best I could do was to A, find really great mentors, and then B, just follow my interests and just do the best I could at the role I was at. There would be moments where I was thinking about potentially moving on, and then somebody would reach out to me, or, you know, so it did feel quite serendipitous in some way. You know, one of the things that I remember when I finished articling, I wrote the bar, and then I came to Toronto, and it so happened that, you know, I was meeting with Bay Street like partners and stuff. I kept on asking them, I was like, you know, if you were in my position, would you redo your career the way that you've done it? And I kid you not, I think like 9 out of 10 people said no.
Really?
Yeah.
The people in the marble towers who seem to have made it wouldn't do the same thing again?
No. And I thought that was fascinating. And like what was interesting was that it was during the pandemic. So like, you know, everybody was kind of meeting on Zoom. So you get a sense of like, you know, they're really gorgeous, like, you know, cottages and things like that, where like I was sitting in my like kitchen, like you're like, hi.
You're in your little condo and they're like 5-bedroom cottage in the Muskokas.
But then to still say no, I thought was quite interesting to me.
Did you get a sense of what any of them would have done instead?
Some of them, like, they talked about being creative and they didn't get to kind of engage in that. And then some of them just talked about, we would have practiced law differently.
Wow.
And we talked a lot about working at a firm or being in-house because, like, I've never worked at a firm. And what I love about being in-house is I get to work with different teams. And so you're around different perspectives and you get to build things, which I think is essentially kind of what I like doing. My kind of path has been quite untraditional in many ways.
Totally.
But in my brain, it kind of makes sense.
That's the only place it needs to make sense. Sometimes in your brain, it might not even make sense, but it does in the universe, And so both of your parents were doctors. Was there ever any pressure on you to go to med school?
Yeah. Initially, because I moved to Canada when I was 15. And so I started university at 16, which is so young compared to everybody else.
You're making the rest of us look so bad.
My dad's a surgeon. My mom's a pediatrician. This is what I should be doing.
Right.
But now when I look back at it, it seems like there was no other path for me than this because I just always wanted to be current in some way. Like I wanted to be
or even
present.
ahead of it.
Yeah.
Because you're seeing stuff now that, like you were just telling me before, like you were talking to an engineer today and they were telling you kind of the changes they wanted to make that might be new for a lot of people. And so you kind of get to hear about it and be a part of it before it even exists in society, right?
I'm looking at, particularly right now, like I'm looking at cars that and technology that we're putting in, in 4 years. And so just to be able to kind of see where that trajectory is.
Yeah.
Particularly when it comes to AI is also quite interesting.
Oh my gosh, AI.
It is.
Oh, baby.
It's an interesting topic for lawyers. People get really nervous.
But it is scary because law traditionally is really bad at being, like you said, you want it to be current. Current and law, those two words together aren't always really like synonymous, right? So, I mean, you couldn't serve a document by email until the pandemic.
Yep.
It had to be fax.
I still see contracts sometimes where like there's
Oh, no time for that now. The computer's starting.
it's like faxing something. And I remember specifically asking, I was like, do we actually even own a fax so that they can send it to us?
No. The amount of times I look at a pleading and I'm like, should I remove the fax number? Is anyone ever, because it's like telephone number, fax, email.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm just going to start taking it out. Like it's 2025.
Waving even more gently. Hello.
I haven't sent a fax since the pandemic. And the lawyers were being given the opportunity to use the technology and we weren't doing it. I wasn't doing it.
I think that there's a fundamental misunderstanding for lawyers about AI. I think we think that it's going to take over our jobs.
Right, which
won't.
it. I'm just kidding. Take my job.
But
You don't think it will, eh?
Yeah, it's just no. Anybody who is proficient with AI, regardless of whatever industry they're in, they're going to be able to be more productive. They're going to be faster in terms of response rates and also kind of just better at their work. I think it helps with thinking, but it only helps if you are actually proficient in the thing that you're doing. So if you are a bad lawyer, like we've all heard of those lawyers who like are submitting things in the US to courts that
Without checking if AI hallucinated case law. Yeah.
And that is ridiculous.
I agree. Yeah.
But if you are a lawyer who is kind of trying to streamline your process as much as you possibly can, I think that's a legitimate usage.
I think it's interesting that you said that AI is a good tool if you're already good at your job.
Yes.
Because you're right, AI will not make you a good lawyer.
No.
In fact, it might. So here's my thing with kind of AI and technology in general is that I don't know if I'm old school. I don't think I'm old school, but I think there's something to be said for learning how to do your own legal research before you're given a machine to do it for you. When it comes to reading case law, understanding how to like cite up a case, doing all that kind of stuff, I always think that you should know how to do the thing before you ask technology to do the thing for you. Even though it's more efficient, I just feel like I don't know if it's a respect for the profession thing. Maybe I sound like a dinosaur because I am totally down for
I completely agree with you.
AI to do a legal memo for me or like draft the first stage of a mediation memo. But that's because I've spent 10 years doing it myself.
Right.
And so now I'm like, I know how to do it. If I need to do it, I can. this is a time-saving thing for me, but I already have the legal understanding of what it's doing for me.
No, I completely agree with you.
I'm not a skeptic. I'm a proponent of it, but I'm like, I guess I'm like midway.
Yeah.
The ghetto, taking short steps 1 foot at a time and kept my head low and never let go, cause if I let go then I'd be
So if it's like anti-AI and pro-AI,
right,
like where would you fall?
I'm pro-AI as long as it's responsible. I think that particularly in terms of privacy concerns, if we can find a way to make it human but really human, I think I'd be comfortable with it. The legal profession in of itself is a little bit more conservative than most.
I find that I do need to push myself to take more risks because I work in a field that is all about identifying risks and trying to avoid them.
Yeah, and mitigating them.
And mitigating them.
What's interesting about you and how you're building out this podcast is that, you know, you talked initially about the fact that this felt like a risk. You were worried about who, you know, like how this would come across in your, you know, quote unquote professional life.
Yep.
But you still did it anyway.
No one cares about what you're doing as much as you think they do.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like everyone's so worried about what everyone else thinks about them. And if everyone thought that, we wouldn't have anything. You're going to fail. People are going to see what you're doing and be like, that's not for me. And that's okay.
Because Carolyn brought you a gift, I decided to bring you a gift.
Oh.
And
you did not have to do that.
And
gifts are not mandatory.
But it's a set of poems by Khalil Gibran. And he talks, one of the things that he talks about is that it's like, you know, if you knew how little people were paying attention to you, like if you got a sense of that, it would hurt your soul. Because you think about how much you kind of, you know, pull back from life in some ways.
Oh man, I have the best people. You guys are great. Honestly, that is so sweet of you.
When I was watching your podcast with Carolyn, I loved the conversation you guys had. It was so enlightening, particularly in terms of finding your people. Finding what was important to you, particularly as a woman of color. I think that one of the things that I found about law that was really quite jarring was how few women and women of color in general are executive levels. I think the benefit of the law is to be able to kind of, you know, structure it and find your way. But you also need mentors. Like one of my close mentors is Aaliyah Ramji. She's the head of MT Ventures.
Yeah.
Like she's one of the only female partners who's doing what she's doing in the entire city and probably in the entire country. And, you know, she's a woman of color. She would tell me it's hard being the first. It's always going to be hard. I'm very fortunate where it's like I have family and I have really great friends and community that allow for that. But it took me a while to figure that out for sure.
And you're in two fields that have not typically had a massive population, right? Tech and law are white boy clubs or have been for a very long time. No offense to white boy. I love one. But it is, as a white woman, Caucasian woman, I'm half Middle Eastern, but no one can tell unless you look at my eyebrows. Like I pass as white.
Right.
So I just have to deal with being a woman.
Right.
And that in and of itself is enough. I actually, the other day, had a man I just met, a male lawyer, find out where I used to work. And turns out he applied to the same firm as I did at the same time. Found out I got the job over him and says, you took my job, and that I must have gotten it because he was too expensive. Cool, you assume that I'm dumber and cheaper than you.
So if you're trying to sell it to me for full price, you picked the wrong girl.
I just laughed and said, nice to meet you, and walked away. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this right now. So I can empathize because that's only one thing. And then, you know, like you said, you're a woman, you're a person of color, you didn't grow up in Canada, you come from the UK, so you spoke the language when you got here.
Yeah.
You speak it better than I do. And you're very educated and very bright. And so if you're feeling that way, you can imagine, right, how like other people might feel if you get here and you're legally educated but you don't speak English.
I do think that the profession is changing. I remember very specifically my first law school class, I don't know if they did this with you, where it's like, they look to your left, look to your right. The other person's not going to graduate.
Yeah, I had one prof do that, and I was like, really?
Yeah.
Really?
He said there's 2 things that you need to know once you get out of law school. One, your legal skills. Those are going to be very important, obviously. And then the second thing is make sure that you look good in a suit and know how to play golf. And
you told me this when we had coffee, and oh my God, the visceral reaction I'm having now is this.
And like, I still don't know how to play golf. I don't like golf. But now you see young lawyers and like lawyers who are millennials, et cetera, who are building really interesting careers and doing really interesting things like you are.
Thanks. I fully agree with you. And I think, number one, our generation, we're kind of rejecting that old school mentality, whereas there's only one way to be a lawyer. You have to look a certain way. You have to come from a certain background. You have to have certain hobbies that are acceptable, like belong to a golf club, belong to a ski club.
Crazy.
That's it, really. Live in certain neighborhoods.
Right. What a waste of time.
Right? And energy.
Because I think if I had to look back at my legal career so far in the 5 years that I've been practicing, the things that I regret the most are the ones where I just felt so anxious and I felt so stressed out. And then you look back at it and you're like, nobody cared.
It didn't matter.
It didn't matter.
No.
At all.
No. And you're made to feel as though it's the end of the world if you get something wrong.
Yeah.
You mean you're going to tell me that I'm wrong? Am I wrong?
And it's so funny that you say you've been practicing for 5 years, because when I talk to you, you seem so wise that I'm like, you've been practicing for 3 times longer than me. When you were articling, did you feel like where you were kind of able to be yourself, or do you feel like you kind of had to put on a mask? Not because of particularly where you were, but just like the legal industry in general.
I think for me, because it was an academic environment, so in that context, I think I was very, very lucky.
Yeah.
But I was also very much really curious. We worked on Supreme Court interventions. Yeah. I was so obsessed at getting it right that I very specifically remember, because if you do an intervention, the court requires a specific kind of paper. It has to be printed a certain way. It has to be bound a certain, margins have to be a certain way. It can't be it was.
I'm glad you're saying that, because sometimes when I'm talking with Andrew or my parents or friends, I feel like people think you're exaggerating when you say just how serious the court is.
Oh no,
about that stuff.
I'm still learning about this stuff and
This stuff? Oh.
There was a couple of times where I was on the verge of crying because the print center didn't do the margins correctly. So I would literally drive to the court and submit it myself.
You could be a doctor. It's like you're delivering a kidney.
Well, it felt like a
cool
kidney.
box of court documents.
No, but it felt it felt like life and death. As a young lawyer, it also felt like I couldn't be the one that let the team down.
Right.
And I think that pressure is something that you learn in law school, and you just kind of carry it until you realize what is good pressure and what's bad pressure.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's such a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And no one can explain to you what it is, because I think it's a little bit different for everyone.
Right.
Some people thrive in certain environments. Other people, it completely, destroys them.
Right.
Other people, it takes a little bit of learning how to thrive in certain pressure environments. There is some bad pressure, obviously, like manipulation or extortion or that kind of thing. But you're right. And you got to learn it on your own almost.
And there were so many other mechanisms that I think, looking back at, if I had, that whole experience would have been easier to kind of decide, well, it really matters that I do my reading. And it really matters that I contribute and am prepared for exams and things like that. But it doesn't necessarily matter that the paper that I'm submitting has a correct format.
You see, we're putting the cover sheets on all TPS reports now before they go out. Did you see the memo about this? Yeah.
Yeah.
Those things, that would have been really helpful, I think.
That's fair. Perspective is always helpful.
Yeah.
Running and therapy. Yeah. I am a big believer in both, and I think that they're both therapeutic in their own ways. I found therapy in undergrad, so very lucky for that. And then I started running. Actually, I didn't get into law school the first time I applied. Right. And I started running as a form of coping, I guess. What am I going to do now? Just run from my problems. And I fell in love with running. Right. And so those two, for me, are massive things. And you were saying that if you would have found those earlier would have made a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
For you.
I started therapy. I was in my third year of law school. What I thought was interesting about the timing of it was I had everything that people told me I should have in law school or like after law school. Like I had articling sorted out. I had a great group of friends. I had a great family. I was loved. As lawyers, you're constantly looking at goalposts, right? You're looking at, get good undergrad grades, then, do well in the LSAT, get into law school, get your first. And so there's always these goalposts. And I got to a stage where there was no goalpost. It was kind of like, now it was like make your own adventure. And that was a time where I thought, I'm not happy. Like there's something missing.
Right.
And I felt like I just wasn't present.
Right.
And so that's when I started going, and I genuinely find it life-changing. It allows me to talk about things I don't necessarily feel comfortable talking about with other people.
Absolutely.
It just gives you that commitment that, I'm thinking about both my physical health now because I'm trying to train for a 5K. So the friend I run with is like, she runs and she's like a gazelle. Like it's just like it's all. I'm sure you're the same.
Oh, you can. Well, you haven't seen me run.
Yeah, so like if you see us running, it's like she's running and like at the end of the block, I'm just kind of like trying to like not have a heart attack. And those two things, if I had, some form of release and then also just, kind of working through some stuff, I thought that would have been really helpful.
It can feel lonely and it can feel debilitating.
Right.
Yeah. And the reason I needed to go to therapy, well, many reasons, but I literally became agoraphobic in undergrad.
Right.
Like I couldn't leave my room to go to class.
Wow.
And to go write exams. You're kind of on your own in a way. And you're in this new environment and you're left to your own resources and no one's checking on you. I just became a recluse and I didn't know how to be a human anymore.
Right.
And I just started failing classes.
Right.
And I was like, by the second year, I was like, if I want to be a lawyer, I need to do something about this. And so I started going to therapy and it really did make a big difference. Sometimes communicating your thoughts and your feelings you almost don't want to like feel like you're burdening someone with that sometimes. If you're like, there's a certain friend you want to go to, but they're going through their own thing. And
what's
like,
funny is
where do I go with that?
Only women say that to me.
And it's hilarious that you say that because sometimes I feel bad bringing up certain things to my therapist because I'm like, I don't want to burden her with that. Literally, that is her job. And she's wonderful. And I've had her since articling. Yeah. But that's literally her job. Do you ever feel that way when you're in therapy? Are you like, oh, no, that's too much. They might be having a tough day.
My therapist is male.
Oh.
And he's Southeast Asian. And he also understands kind of like Muslim culture and
right.
Which I grew up in.
It's a good balance.
Yeah.
Because my therapist, and I don't know if this makes a difference, but she's from the States.
Right.
She's quite direct.
Right.
She's quite blunt. And one of my best friends is American. And she's also very direct and blunt. And I need those women in my life.
Right.
Because if you don't have people calling you out on your shit, I think it stunts your growth. Because you need support.
Yeah.
But you also need someone to be like, you're being unreasonable.
That's what good friendship is. And
Yeah.
that's what good friends are. And that is what good, family members are. And so it's so interesting to be around people who are so significantly different than you, look at the world in different ways.
Yeah.
Who will also then say, you know what, you were wrong, or you're spiraling in a point where this doesn't matter, or in the course of your career this won't matter.
Right.
And I think if you find that, you're very lucky.
When you're spiraling, the hardest thing is to bring yourself out of a spiral and to think about things objectively and in a reasoned way.
Yeah.
And so much of what I've spiraled about in the past are things that like literally will not matter in a week's time or even 5 hours time, whether it's personal or professional.
Yeah.
And I think a skill that I'm always working on, it's going to be a lifelong mission, is like to notice when I'm doing it and stop myself. Right. But it does help if you bring up those thoughts in an environment where you're safe to spiral because you know someone's going to catch you.
Yeah.
And therapy, I find, is amazing for that because you can bring up like things where you're like, I'm going to go down a dark path right now. But it gives you that safe space to bring it up and have that safety net and have that like, think about it this way, or yes, you're right, or no, you're bonkers, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
But finding a good therapist is life-changing.
When I went to U Ottawa, I had a senior lawyer, like a friend who was a lawyer. She was like, I have a group of friends I'm going to connect you with. And I said, Okay. And it was literally like a group of 6 or 7 Muslim female feminist lawyers. Even now, like we have a WhatsApp group that talks every day throughout the day.
That's so nice.
But we're raising these issues and we're talking about, you know, this male lawyer said this to me, or do you think I'm ready to jump? Will I come across as a job hopper? Like all these things that you need, you know, a community around.
Absolutely.
And the fact that kind of we have the same social background is such an invaluable part of that process.
Absolutely.
Finding community, and then really kind of investing in taking care of myself, which is not something I'm very, very good at.
A lot of lawyers suck at it.
It is.
We suck at it.
You suck, Peter, you suck. Peter, you don't do anything of value. Peter, you suck.
You know, I don't know a ton about what you do from like a experience perspective. I've never worked in your field before, but it's stressful.
Yeah.
And there's a lot riding on what you do every day. And like you said, you were brushing your teeth and thought about a certain jurisdiction that you should like write a contract in or something like that.
Yeah.
Like you can't turn it off.
Yeah.
Can I just brush my teeth in peace?
Because I started a new role, you know, you're still onboarding, and so I got my laptop and got all these different things.
Yeah.
But I didn't get my work phone yet. I'll be in my house and I'll kind of like be doing different things. I'll be like, you know what, I might have missed an email or something. So I'll go upstairs, open my laptop, look at it. Not healthy, I think.
Yeah. Don't judge yourself for it. Yeah. Don't put moral weight to it.
Right. I'm trying.
Because it might not be like your ideal balance,
right,
but you're not alone. So when I first got my work phone at my new job 2 years ago, at first I couldn't figure, surprise no one, I couldn't figure out the tech part of it. So I couldn't figure out actually how to get the Teams on my phone for messages. So for the first few months, I was too ashamed to tell anyone that I didn't know how to figure it out. Eventually, I found the IT guy who is just the sweetest. And he helped me out. And he's like, when did you start? And I was like, April. He's like looking at his watch. I'm like, I know it's August. I couldn't figure it out. But I literally I kind of have anxiety. I'm like, what if someone needs me?
Yeah.
What if my manager needs me? What if da-da-da-da? And I had email, but I just didn't have the messaging app.
Right.
And I was like, I would literally stress about it. You know, this morning a nightmare woke me up at 4 a.m.
Right.
And I couldn't get back to sleep. So I got up, I went to the bathroom. What did I do on my way back to the bedroom? I checked my fucking work email.
Yeah.
Who's emailing me at 5 a.m.? Yeah. You didn't know this. But like, I'm literally like tapping the keys quietly because my work phone was downstairs. I don't want to go downstairs. But I was just curious. I was curious if anything had come on since I checked at 10 p.m. and I'm in-house and there's no one breathing down my neck. But it's still litigation,
right?
And it's still law, and we are who we are.
Yeah.
We're superstars. We are who we are. We're dancing like we're.
And it's really hard to turn off.
If you work at global companies, the worst part of that process, or that spiraling that you're talking about, is the fact that there are people who are working, right?
Yeah.
So like
it's always 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah, like no matter what, there's always going to be emails that I haven't read because there are people who are going to be reaching out to me.
Right.
And I find like, you know, the more public my role gets and the more, you know, I take on, I find the more, you know, the space in my brain, at least for mistakes and things like that, gets smaller and smaller. What led to my burnout. And it was one of the things where I really had to step back and say, hold on a second. I'm genuinely not loving what I'm doing right now.
Right.
And I think that was a problem for me.
Right. And it makes a lot of sense because when you mentioned therapy and you mentioned running, those things are great, but you can't, what's the saying? Like you can't get better in the environment that poisoned you.
Yeah.
If you stay there.
Yeah.
You can take the medicine, but you're going to keep running into the same problem over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask about your burnout, and I'm glad you brought it up because that is a thing that happens in our profession so much.
Yeah.
And you haven't been in the profession for 40 years where it's like, yeah, of course she burned out at year 25. Like it was early.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot.
I do think that because it's a generational shift in terms of the legal profession, we're pushing back, but then also we're seeing that that those expectations are just not what we want our lives to look like.
Yeah.
And I think that at the end of the day, as long as you have space to really address that, then you're okay. And when you don't have space, then, you know, you're in trouble.
Regardless of your home situation, regardless of whether or not you have kids, regardless of whether you're single or partnered or whatever, the legal industry, the billable industry, the law firm structure is built for men who have wives at home who are taking care of everything.
Yeah.
That's just the reality. And I will die on that hill.
Well, like that was actually one of the reasons where I recognized I was burnt out, because I have a dog and I'd bought a house. I was like, I'd come home and like, you know, you'd have a long work day. You're constantly thinking about jurisdictions and things like that.
Yeah.
And then I had to figure out like the tires in my car, the things outside of my career and my profession were the things that weren't bringing me joy or energy. Like the best way I can describe it is like I just felt like everything was getting grayer and grayer. I do feel like all of my peers are going through very similar experiences.
Really?
I don't know if it's because it's tech and it's law and things move so fast.
Right. Well, I don't think it's just tech.
No.
But it does make sense because I find that a lot of lawyers around our age are like, oh, 30 more years of this. Literally, sometimes the severance song plays in my head while I'm like redacting log notes or something. And it does happen. But I like to think that that's like partially a joke. It's not my reality. Like I don't sit there and be like, I hate my job every second of the day.
Right.
If that's your reality, that is tough.
Yeah.
And no wonder things seem gray.
Yeah. Everybody's looking at you and saying, okay, well, you know, she's kind of made it. She's doing great.
Why aren't you happy?
Why aren't you happy?
Yeah.
And then
you have everything you've ever wanted and worked for. There's no goalposts anymore.
No.
Choose your own adventure, be happy. It's quite a moment of reckoning, eh?
It really is.
Why, oh, why didn't I take the blue pill?
It took me, you know, a good 6 to 7 months to be like, you know, let me look at my life and really, really look. Do I love the law? Do I love technology and AI? And is that where I want to go? Because, you know, another statistic that really kind of jumps out to me and I think about a lot is how I think it's like approximately like 60% of women leave the legal industry after 5 years. And that is an insane number.
Yeah.
And so
considering we make up half the population and then by the time you get to so many women, some guys too, I know, but more women have left the legal industry for other jobs, which is great if that's what you want.
Right.
But at a certain point, I think you're right. Is it an industry thing?
Yeah.
You know, and I think part of that is having the conversations and like just something so simple as just like standing up for yourself.
Yeah.
Like it took me a long time. And by a long time, I mean like only in the past like 6 or 12 months have I felt comfortable like actually standing up for myself and not laughing at a sexist joke in a discovery. But like that's the kind of stuff where like we used to just be like, okay, like this is uncomfortable. I'm just going to move on and just like letting it happen.
Right.
Choose your battles.
Yeah.
Obviously. Once you learn you don't need to let that kind of stuff happen, I think the more and more people just stand up for themselves. And I think that in that sense, more women, more people of color, people from different backgrounds. I think it's so important to have that in every workplace.
And that's where kind of, you know, mentorship and like really great managers are such a huge part of that, because first 3 years of my career, I felt very uncomfortable praying in my office as a Muslim. I think that comes with experiences. You know, you stand up for yourself and say, listen, you know, I'm just not available. This time is blocked. Yeah. I had a really hard time doing that, where I'd be like, I'm not available here.
Right.
Or I'm on vacation to Japan, but I won't be available for email. But then I will check email constantly.
I know.
And it's just
hard.
Yeah.
How long were you there for?
Almost 2 weeks.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you took your work phone?
I took my work phone. Yeah. I remember.
Was it expected of you, or was it your choice? Or was it kind of like, it's your choice, but there's no choice?
Oh, I had like memos, everything.
Yeah.
I was so over-prepared that.
But then at that point, leave your fucking phone and go to Kyoto.
Yeah.
Like, go enjoy it. Go
and like,
live your life.
That was kind of one of the indicators to me when I was looking back at how I was going to deal with this burnout, was the fact that I was in like what I thought was, and what I still think is like some of the most beautiful places in the world.
You're in paradise.
And I was still worrying about other expectations. I remember very specifically coming back from Japan and being like, something doesn't quite feel right. Like Japan, and in general, often also my work feels like kind of the perfect kind of ode to the past and the present and the future, prideful of their history.
Yeah, it's a beautiful history.
It really is.
Yeah.
And then, but they're very much in the future.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you come back. I came back to North America thinking, oh, wow, like, you know, we need to like step it up.
Medieval times over here.
Yeah. Like all of this like construction on Eglinton needs to sort itself out.
Hey, where do you think you're going? You can't come this way.
I hope you go back.
Yes.
And I hope you go back
multiple times
without a work phone.
Yeah, I will try.
I really do. I hope that for you, because in my new job, I'm not allowed to take my work phone overseas.
Oh, I love that.
I'm not allowed to take it over a border. And so that is new for me, because I had the same feeling when you came back from Japan. We went to Mexico, and I had the same feeling coming home, was that I'm standing in Tulum in my version of paradise, checking my work phone.
Yeah.
And it's like, do you have to, or do you choose to?
Right.
And what is anything on fire?
Right.
But something's always on fire. It's law. And it's like, what, when you were going back to like the pressure, good pressure, bad pressure.
Right.
I don't know. It's something that I'm always trying to figure out.
When I was interviewing for my second job out of law school, this partner at this firm, he explained to me that he had this cottage in Quebec somewhere, and they didn't have like Wi-Fi. His wife would get really upset that he was checking his work phone. So what he would do is at the time he had a BlackBerry. So he would put the BlackBerry in the car.
Okay.
In the boot, you guys say
the trunk, yeah, the
right?
boot, yeah.
So he would put it in the trunk of the car, and so she would drive out to like, you know, get groceries or something, because like they were there for whatever.
He would get reception,
yeah,
and the emails
pinged.
would load.
Yeah,
shut up.
And then he'd come back, and then he'd help like her take groceries out of the bag, out of the car, and then he'd be able to check his email. The fact that you and I completely understand.
Yeah.
His intention behind
Absolutely.
that is very much kind of the conditioning that we have in this industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was on a cruise once in a job where I was allowed to take my work laptop with me, sitting on the deck of a cruise in the Bahamas, arguing with a plaintiff's lawyer about something that mattered so little I can't even explain to you. It was the least consequential thing I could have worried about at that time, but I was worried about it.
Yeah.
And I worked every single day of that week.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter. And I now in my like 30s, I'm like, I gotta learn how to relax.
No, but my therapist, she said to me, and I kid you not, I did this. She said to me, okay, on Sunday, we would have sessions on Mondays. And so she would say to me, okay, you go for like an hour, take a hike or something, and then come back into your car and then drive home, but leave your phone.
Right.
I was like, okay. So I go.
Sounds simple.
Simple.
Yeah.
Do this whole thing, go to session the next week. And I was like, you know what? I was so productive. I had my AirPods in. I listened to like these 2 podcasts. I did this. You know, I was thinking about, you know, how I was going to draft that thing, blah, blah, blah. And she looked at me as if I was literally losing my mind.
She's like, you failed.
And she's like, no. I don't want you, like, I want you to not listen to anything. Like, it doesn't have to be productive time.
Right.
But in my mind, I couldn't even hike.
And so did you get to that point? Did you ever take a hike in Gatineau Park without your headphones?
It took me like, I would kid you not, like maybe 2 months.
Yeah, doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, even like now, I should treat, like when I commute to work, if I'm riding my bike, for example, when it's nice out and I ride my bike, I will take, like if I'm at a red light, I will take out my work phone from my backpack and check my email while I'm sitting at a red light.
Yeah.
I've been on my bike for 5 minutes.
Right.
Nothing has come in. And if it has, it's not that urgent.
Right.
So I still, and I think I always will, as long as I'm a lawyer, that'll just be part of who I am. But I think it's just recognizing it.
Yeah.
And trying to minimize it. Because saying I'll never do that, it's not realistic.
It's not, no.
And when you do it, you feel like a failure.
Yeah.
Right? But it's just about recognizing that it's a thing, learning how to be present, and you're not always going to get it right.
Oh, it isn't something that we're taught. And it's not something, I think that inherently there's a specific kind of person who's attracted to the law. And there, I think it says something about me that I'm attracted to tech, law, and politics, all very intensely intense industries.
It's interesting that you say it's not something we're taught, and I would even go a step further and say it's not even something we're told we're going to have to learn. Like it's almost like it's just a given.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people go into law because we not only expect it to take over our life, but like I was certainly someone who wanted it to take over my life. Like I wanted to be working all the time. And I think it is a reckoning to be like, oh, I don't want that. You know?
Yeah.
Was that part of your burnout where you were like, I don't want this to take up my entire existence? Like that's not my choice? Or,
you know, going from say undergrad to say 3 or 4 years into your career, that's a decade approximately, if not. And so I just felt like I'd been hustling for so long that I didn't know what it felt like to just breathe.
Take a hike.
Yeah.
Literally.
To take a hike. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it really came down to realizing that I wasn't taking care of my body and myself.
Yeah.
But also, you know, the impact that you have on the people around you.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you don't want your 8-year-old nephew to be hesitant to ask you about something because he thinks that you're going to be busy. Like I never want that to be a consideration for them.
That's fair.
And so and I think so you look at your life and say, okay, well, what does that look like? And and it didn't look how I wanted it to look like.
Right. Well, I'm proud of you for making a change, because a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't, or they wish they would have done it sooner. And I think good for you for.
Oh, I absolutely wish I'd done it sooner. Like I thought,
which is because I find the manner in which you did it and the pace at which you did it quite impressive, like quite decisive. But do you feel like it took you?
No, because
longer?
Like even when we were talking about the fact that you ran and you went to therapy while you were in university and in law school. In the back of my head, I was like, man, if I had done that at that time, I would have been so farther along.
Yeah.
But it's because everybody's journey is different.
Everyone's journey is different. Yeah.
And so in the context of, you know, do I wish I had done this at the start of that 10-year sprint? Yeah, absolutely.
Of course. No is almost always a complete answer. And I know some people go through their whole legal career where that is not the case.
Right.
And so like you were saying about being creative or having these things on outside of your job that fill you up, it's like sometimes you have to remind yourself that like you have agency. Sarah, my friend Sarah that you know, she's always like, you have free will. She's like, I had to remind myself today. She says this all the time. She's like, I had to remind myself today, I have free will. And it's like, you forget that as a lawyer a lot of the time.
But you're also taught that you saying you do or you don't have capacity is not a conversation.
Right.
Right? Like that
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
No.
And I think, you know, the worst thing I find in my traveling life by far is Wi-Fi on planes. I do not want it. I want to be unavailable.
Oh.
I hate it.
It's too tempting for you?
No, it's just then I'm available.
Right.
Like,
because there's not the excuse.
Yeah.
Isn't that a bitch?
It really is. I hate it so much.
I'm the same. I love flying. I love travel, and I love the liminal space that travel gives me.
Yeah.
Being in an airport, being on a plane, I love it.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason I love it, you're right, is because I'm not available.
Right.
Like, I know technically I am. Technically I could get Wi-Fi on the plane. Technically I get Wi-Fi in the airport. But I view that as just like, I'm in this space and I'm in transition. And I'm not here and I'm not there. And I love that feeling. And that's really one of the only places I feel that way.
Yeah.
And so I'm sorry about the Wi-Fi.
Well,
I'm sorry that like technology, because when you think about it, isn't it wild? Like you were in a steel aluminum tube,
crazy,
being shot through the sky. And someone's like, did you get to that contract, Maleeha?
It's like a miracle, and nobody sees it that way.
It's a miracle.
It's real. It's real crystal. Yeah. It's real. So? Put them in your purse. Go ahead. Put them. Just put them in your purse. Fill it up.
You know, going back to what we were talking about, like, you know, not being able to turn off your phone. I was intending on taking like about like a 3-month sabbatical to really kind of figure out what I wanted to do next. And so I was in London, and then the startup that I was talking to, they wanted to interview me. And my first inclination was like, no,
right,
I'm not going to do it. Right. Why are you looking at your email, even if it's your personal email? But then I did. I ended up interviewing with them. And what was so great about being in London itself was that I left my phone behind. I was in,
for you.
You know, in the in the city, experiencing all the things that I love about the city.
Yeah.
But you don't get that if you're not putting yourself in those spaces.
Absolutely.
And so, I'm a huge advocate of traveling.
But I did have a Diet Coke, which I'm not a pop person, but.
Oh no, I'm huge.
Are you?
Yeah, Red Bull and Diet Pepsi, my vices.
For law school, is that when you got into Red Bull and Pepsi, or was that before?
No, law school.
Law school?
Yeah.
Law school's when I got into the Red Bull.
I never took the Adderall and all that sort of stuff that people were taking.
I didn't even know people did that until after I graduated. So naive.
How much of a mess everybody was, because I thought I was a mess.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
I totally know what you mean.
Like when I hear people like yourself or other people tell me about their law school experience, I'm like, if we had just talked to each other.
That's what I'm trying to do. Can we just talk to each other and be honest about our struggle?
It would have made such a huge difference.
It would.
I think. And particularly like all those people who like seemed like all put together.
Oh my God. I know. Yeah. I know. Looking back now, I'm like, I don't think anyone knew what they were doing.
No.
When you talk about burnout and you talk about, faking it till you make it, is there a piece of advice you would give to either yourself or young lawyers to kind of either try to avoid burnout or catch it more quickly and do something about it?
Listen to your gut. The mentors that feel the best, the friends that feel the best are always the ones that you kind of knew already.
Yeah.
So if I had just kind of like listened to myself and put myself in positions where either I was taking care of myself or whether I was, just looking at opportunities, because during OCIs and all that sort of stuff, it's quite stressful for a lot of people in terms of being picked. So I think that's probably the advice I would give. The fact that I had nobody who could show me what a legal career was actually has really helped me in building a career that I really like.
Right.
And if I was asking the same question, I was asking partners, would you do what you've done?
Yeah.
My answer would be yes.
That's amazing. Do you feel like you haven't seen a lot of people in law who look like you before you entered the legal field, right? So there is no mold.
No.
Right?
At all.
Got to create your own.
What I found really surprising was that nobody thought that was odd. The more rooms I was in and the more kind of the more high profile the work that I was doing, the more I realized that they didn't think it was odd because that's just how they practice law. And that's different now.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And I think that for a profession that serves everyone or should be serving everyone needs to feel represented and seen and understood. So my last question for you is a question that I just like to ask my guests, a random question. If you weren't a lawyer, what career or job would you love to be in?
I would really, really love to be in publishing.
Okay.
Yeah. Like if I had my time back, I would have done an English degree. I think that it's just like it's such an interesting way to connect with culture and people, because the stories are great and authors when they write in their particular time are interesting. So I think I've always had a love of words.
Yeah. This has been so nice.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so that was my amazing conversation with Maleeha. If you liked this or loved it or learned something, or if you just pretended to listen while doing the dishes, please consider subscribing, giving us a like, commenting below, positive or negative. I'm looking for a negative comment. Yeah. I'm putting it out there.
I want it.
Please, for Maleeha. If you think that this podcast or this video might resonate with someone, share it with your weirdest friend. You can find us on Instagram, Apple, Spotify, and just join TikTok. It happened. So find us on TikTok. And if you're on there, give me a follow. And in the meantime, stay connected. And until next time, bye.
Wow, you're like a professional.
Oh, you're so sweet. Honestly, I get
I love it.
He always hands me